In this tutorial, we will go over how to test a buyer using LeadProsper's Test Buyer tool. It is extremely important to utilize the Test Buyer tool before taking your buyer live. When you create a new buyer for a campaign, the buyer is set to paused. This is done to allow users to test their campaigns and submit those tests to their buyers before they go live. Running tests are helpful to ensure that everything is set up correctly and the leads being sent match the format required by your buyer. When testing, it is important to set parameters in your buyer body or payload configuration to identify requests as test. These parameters can be dependent on your buyer, so always double check with them when setting these. Test parameters can include filling out one of the fields as test, or including test somewhere in the payload of the buyer itself. There are two ways to get to the Test Buyer tool. Starting off in the campaign you want to use, select the buyer you will want to test. For this example, our campaign is solar, and our buyer will be Solar Buy 2. The first way to get to the Test Buyer tool is by selecting the cogwheel next to the buyer you are testing and then clicking Test Buyer. The other way is to open up the buyer itself and select the Test Buyer option at the top right of the page. After clicking either of these options, you will open up LeadProsper's Test Buyer tool. On this page, you will see a list of all the fields that you created for your campaign, along with some example data for each field. Numbers, list of values, dates, and so on are randomly generated to match each field configuration. For example, we can see in the Trusted Form field our system generated a correctly formatted Trusted Form URL. For Homeowner, our system generated one of the two values allowed in that field, yes or no. If you want to generate new example data, simply click the Generate Payload button at the top of the page. You can edit any of these values to match what a real lead would enter on a landing page form. However, it is important to note that you have to match the formatting or the values for the fields in order for the test to be run. For example, if our phone field is set to only accept hyphenated numbers, we must make sure to enter it in that format. The same goes for other types of fields. If the field format is numeric, we cannot type letters. If the field has a list of allowed values, like Homeowner, where we have yes and no, we cannot set it to anything other than those values. Doing so in testing will result in an error message, as shown on screen. If there are any error messages preventing you from sending a test, be sure to go over the campaign fields to see what the formatting needs to be. When testing, please make sure to not only check the values of your fields, but also try to closely match the values to what you think a buyer in the vertical you are working with would buy. For example, with a home service like solar, which is our test campaign's vertical, almost every buyer is going to be looking for a homeowner. So, when setting up the homeowner field in this test, if I want it to pass, I will more than likely need this to be yes. Another example can be seen in that if the buyer is only accepting leads in Florida, you may want to change the state value to match what would fit your buyer's needs. Click the Send Request button again. What we will see first is a list of debugging messages at the top, along with the buyer transaction log. We can see what data has been sent to the buyer and what their response was. When using the Test Buyer tool, the goal is to look at these debugging messages and fix what is possible to fix. Right at the start, we can see error field phone has wrong format. If we look in the buyer transaction log, we can see the phone number we are sending is hyphenated. However, if we go to our API specs for this test buyer, we can see the phone needs to be formatted in the 10-digit format. To fix this, we will need to add a transformer in the buyer's payload for the phone field. Use this link in the buyer payload to see what transformers to use if you need to add any. Let's send another request. At the bottom, we can see we have error lead rejected. This can be a common warning found in the Test Buyer tool. This error message came from the buyer. However, it does not tell us on our end what the error really is. If you ever come across this issue, we recommend you to go over the data in your test. Make sure the fields are filled out correctly and the data matches closely to what the buyer will accept. If everything looks good on your end, but you still have this error, we recommend you to copy the data from the test, open up a blank editor to paste what was copied, and then send this file to your buyer to see why the test is failing. Looking back at the debugging messages, we can see other warnings. At the top, we see potential test parameters are found. This message will go away once any test parameters you set have been removed. Next, we have an invalid shortcode debugging message. This is seen in the square foot field. This warning is showing that when the test sends the square foot field, This field is not mapped or created in our campaign. This warning will let you know which field will need to be fixed or removed. In some cases, there could be a typo in the payload, or it could be a field that will not apply for the campaign. We will remove this from the payload and send another request. Now we can see that the test was accepted from the buyer. However, LeadProsper is marking the test as error. In this case, there is a buyer response mapping configuration error. This means the response mapping does not match what we received from the buyer. We can see this as a debugging message at the top as well. With this, we recommend you use the response parser tool to identify the correct response mapping, fix the buyer, and then retest. Use this video tutorial to learn how to use the response parser tool. Once everything is accepted, there are two things to do. Firstly, at the top right of the test, click on the Copy slide down and select Copy Everything. This is going to copy the data from the test so that you can create a document. Next, we recommend opening up a blank editor and pasting what was copied into the editor. Here you can see everything from your test, including all of the API data that you sent in your payload, including headers, the body, etc. Essentially, everything that the buyer would need to confirm the test looks good on their end. Once your buyer looks over the test and confirms they are good to go forward with the campaign, you will have two more things to do. First, if you haven't already, go back to your payloads where you have any test parameters and turn these off. Then, once everything is confirmed, you can go to your campaign and hit resume on your buyer to go live. This is how to test your buyer in LeadProsper. Thanks for watching.